within within those traditions, and because it was a story that helped me, that saved me. It's and it, as opposed to it being like the message, the evangelical, the good, the just the news. What is that like? I think, and that is a way of operating inside of that story, inside of that way, and that I think I can't remember who said it earlier, but that the necessity, it was Sarah, was that her name, that was in the estuary.
Sarah. Yep.
She said we need structures and boundaries, and we need authorities, like that's real. And I know I can hear Mark Lefebvre right now being like, yeah, exactly, go to the Catholic Church. It's like, so
Even
but
though he
that
doesn't.
I guess, I don't know, but the I see that as a necessity, and I do see that there's an attempt to work out foibles that I've experienced in the nebulous lowest version of institution that there has been in within Christianity. So I don't know.
All right, Cassidy, final comment on your point, and then Michael Sartori.
Well, I think Christian's point is interesting about this tradition, and it bounces back to something that hit me with Sarah, of this idea of like generational handoff and holding on to the tradition that was given to you. And I look at myself and it's like, well, I was given Protestantism. And it's this bittersweet thing where the recognition of like, I loved Protestantism and what it gave me. I'm very grateful for it. And yet I came to a place where I go, whoa, I don't believe in sola scriptura. I don't believe in faith and faith alone. I can't even be a Protestant if I want to be. That's just like, because of these, it's so much in the confession of what it would be to be a Protestant. And I had to accept, okay, well, what do I do now? And, obviously I became Orthodox, but there's this sense of like, how do you hold on tradition? And I think especially from the very modern sense of Protestantism that I came from, how do you hold on to a tradition when you're constantly changing to be relevant? Because that in 10 years, what you're doing now is not actually what's going to be still going on in the church. And so how do you manage that? That's just like that's really something I struggle with. And I guess I don't struggle with it as much anymore now that I am in a more traditional sense, but it's a different kind of struggle of like facing that past and then moving forward. And I just find the whole conversation.
Real quick, what would you want to give your kids from your Protestant heritage? Is there anything that you want to give your kids from your Protestant heritage?
Yeah, like genuine love of like Christ and Jesus, and just that like real genuine like centering of that. And I think a striving for truth even when it's difficult.
I wish my kids were more Bible nerds.
Yeah.
That's something that Protestants did well. Michael Sartori, what say you?
Okay.
What do you have to say to this conversation?
Well, first of all, I'm being very emergent right now by having a graffiti wall behind me, because that's the best way to get the truth out there. But so hopefully this will satisfy Nathan a little more. I mean, I think clearly everybody that was in this conversation, everybody's a millennial, and everybody's trying to answer more or less the question of how do we pass this on to our kids? I think the intergenerational handoff thing really is the big question. And I think that, but also, and I think the problem is not like with any of these movements, though there's a whole nother thing beneath that, which is that at some point our culture changed from one where people lived in the same town for their whole life. And, you had Saddleback Sam's out there because of the economy and this whole thing where you go to college and then you go where the work is, and it creates these bubbles of population where you can't there's no grandparents around to be had for your church plant or whatever, so you just have this phenomenon. And I think that so I think that having that aspect of it is part of why we've seen failure. And you could even say, like, when you look at why did the Young, Restless, and Reformed wing of the whole emergent thing survive more, it's because those were, those are the ones where they're looking at John Piper and Tim Keller, who are, for the most part, that's the same age as most of our parents. And so you got like a surrogate dad, whereas if you were following Rob Bell and hoping to be coated in the dust of your rabbi, and then he just kept stepping in dog shit or whatever, it didn't really work. So, in some sense, it is that ability to like, and that's even the thing with like Mark Driscoll. He wouldn't listen to Tim Keller and John Piper because they weren't as good at church as him. So he didn't respect them. And, so then the last point I'll make on that is now we kind of have, so you have all the people returning tradition in this kind of metagelical movement. When I look at that, I think about like, okay, I'm whatever I am, like mega church. My parents more mainline evangelical. My grandparents Catholic. And so then when I see like people of going all these traditions and trying to work together, it's like, oh, well, this would be the equivalent in a sense of being able to have a conversation with my parents and my grandparents and, live in community, which is what families hopefully do, regardless of those differences in the approaches to faith.
Okay. Also, Rob Bell's cool. So.
Well, but
no, you went
again,
on Oprah.
Rob, but again, that gets back to CW's point. I mean, whether someone wants to say this is science or not, CW's colonized me pretty hard in this conversation because, Rob Bell, reached for Oprah and I've seen that so often where people, let's say they're a big deal on an evangelical stage. We saw this in music a lot. Then they get sort of up into the civilizational level and they're just kind of, Rob Bell is edgy and perennial in an evangelical context, but then when he gets on Oprah, it's like, hey, you're really going to go toe to toe with Deepak Chopra? I don't think so. And so there's a lot going on here. And I don't know what Rob Bell is doing now. And I think part of it was so interesting to me that so many of these emergent pastors were youth pastors that really wanted to sort of grow up and be the senior pastor in their church and have the church keep being kind of a seeker, ever growing thing. They really wanted to be the Billy Graham. And when they got deplatformed by the evangelicals, they didn't want to stay. We're pastoring a tiny little church in an insignificant place for a group of people. Now, I'm not saying that of Tim Keller or John Piper, but again, back to kind of Tripp's point, these people were institutional people that said, and part of the reason, why don't I leave the Christian Reformed Church? Well, I don't want to. I don't see that I'm out of spec in terms of our confessionality. These are my people. I love these people. To go Orthodox would be a very Protestant move for me. I think to be Orthodox for me means I stay with the Christian Reformed Church because these are my people. So
it's almost as if like Rob Bell was very helpful for me and he doesn't have to be helpful for other people and other people don't like him. And that's fine.
I love Rob Bell. I saw him. I went to go see a concert, essentially where he just talked. So,
I just mean like there is no monolithic answer because people outside of, as a Christian, I would say the mystical Christ, which manifests individually everywhere in different ways.
Okay, Corner Citizen. I'm going to close this at 1:00 and I got a few more people to get in. I haven't seen Andrew take a bite yet, so I think he's really failing us, but all right, Alan, what say you?
Well, I unfortunately I was just about to slam dunk on Rob Bell, so I feel bad. I don't even know.
Love wins. Love
wins ultimately. I don't even know who these people are, but I just wanted to make a point of like how really like in the desert we are, and that really leads to like you need to answer fundamental questions and like restructure things fundamentally. and even just having places to like gather. Well, like where this is coming from is like I go to a somewhat conservative church, and it makes me laugh because it's very like guys need to, the husband needs to lead and blah blah blah. And then I notice like a lot of the women drive their husbands into the church, and I'm like, wait, this isn't what we're talking about. This is the opposite. It's like you have women marrying non-believers, which you're not really supposed to do that to begin with. And then they're like, well, now you're going to be the religion I am. And it's like, but like, that's because like we're somewhat in a desert, and even, to be in the type of church I'm in, that's, there's no structure, there's not a fleet of men who've been catechized into like this format and structure. So yeah, it's like things need to be topsy-turvy, and that's okay for right now. But like even just the ability to come together, eat, talk, and laugh. There's that quote, there's no sound I like better than adult male laughter. Yeah, that's because that's from C.S. Lewis. That's because he was in an institution. He was a professor, and there were lounges with leather-bound books and chairs and pipes, and there's a whole way for them to come together, and we just don't have that. And now that we're outside in the outer courtyard, yeah, it's not going to be confessional. It's not going to be like, well, this is how we take communion. This is how people. It's just like, yeah, and it's by definition loose. So yeah, any attempt to like. But that's what it offers. That's the benefit of being in the desert. That's the benefit of being outside, is that people who don't know how to get together can get together. That's the benefit of the icebreaker. That's the benefit of small talk. Everyone says, I hate small talk. It's like, well, how the hell are you going to get to big talk if you can't do small talk? So like, I think just having a space like this, and shout out to CBAX for bringing up my like, yeah, randos is a great way to show how do you do icebreakers? How do you do small talk? How does PVK treat random people off the street?
Oh, Shannon, you got sound issues.
Yeah.
No, keep going.
Yeah.
Any responses to Alan? I just want a note from Mark Lefever's priest that he goes to mass at least once a week. If I don't get that note, all of his talk about institutions means nothing to me.
I do think there is a hunger for young men to be told what to do by another man in our culture, related to your comments about being dragged to church by your wife. And for Nathan Orman's statistics,
or maybe a woman
told
what to do by their wife, right?
So on the statistics side for Nathan Orman, there is an interesting. I don't know. I can't cite the whoever's and the whatevers, but have seen it, on the godforsaken Twitter, that the likelihood of like a religious faith being passed to the children has the most statistically important person is that the father is serious about the faith. So,
yeah. All right, Jacob Federecci, welcome. It's so good to see you, man. So glad you came.
Well, CW is here, so I had to come. CW said the institutions are parachurch organizations, and I think he's half right. The churches are para-synagogue institutions. You do not know what you worship. We do know what we worship for salvation.
Well, I did say Christian institutions, to be fair, but go ahead.
And I mean, the way you know it is the play yesterday. I told David he can't stream it on my channel because my channel is about the Bible. And I was kind of guessing Paul would stream it to his channel, and he kind of did, because that's where the Bible resides in TLC, is on my channel.
It's the fundamentalist remnant.
Look, if you're looking to participate in the God of history, if you're looking to participate in the kingdom of God on earth, you have to look at history. You have to look at the arc of history. You have to decide how you're going to live your life. And I think where the light is should be obvious to anybody who wants to look for the light.
I think there's something to that. I mean, at risk of being glib, Judaism has the often tragic but perennial advantage of being an insurgent movement, like everywhere it is. And there's this sense in which Christianity is sort of a victim of its own success, especially on a, massive cultural level.
What is success in Christianity?
Which makes
like martyrdom.
I'm waiting for Hezi. Hezi owes me a conversation, because what I'm super curious about is civilizational Judaism in Israel, because that then is the opposite of what CW is pointing to. Whereas now, finally, after thousands of years, the Jews get to say, this is our state, this is our land, how will we do it? And in some ways, then, now you've got the difficult situation of Christendom. And of course, Jacob, we know that you're an anti-Zionist, but pro-Israel anti-Zionist.
Paul, it hasn't changed. Being Jewish in Israel, most people who are citizens of the state of Israel do not identify with Judaism. Judaism is a religion, despite what Zionists would like to make it.
All right. Any other responses to Jacob? Then we're going to go to Andrew to see if he actually wants to say something, because he has not eaten anything. We've seen no personal hygiene care. He's mostly
Andrew is just confirming the vibist nature of this. He's
right.
heavy with the vibe.
He's confirming Nathan's worst critique of us, that this channel, like the Seinfeld show, is finally about nothing. It's not about the Bible. It's not about. Well, I will let anything on my channel.
At least Jess has a noir vibe.
That's true. That's true. All right. So Andrew is going to continue to do what Andrew does. Jess, what say you?
Well, along those lines, maybe like a small take, not a very hot take, maybe a lukewarm take, is that the emergent church kind of took the aesthetics of that evangelicalism was kind of forefronting, and then took the aesthetics seriously, and then tried to remake everything vibing from there. And I think it petered out because of that, but also that was also why they decided to take on all the theology too, is because they took seriously the aesthetics.
Well, and I think, Sarah's point about liturgy was super important, because, the ancient modern books, the ooze, the emergent real, we want candles, we want chants, and so they really leaned into that, but they didn't get to the point of saying, oh, I'm going to go to the people who know how to do smells and bells, because, and then that's exactly what happened later in terms of, I'm going to go to Orthodoxy, or I'm going to go to Catholicism, or I'm going to go to Anglicanism. And because there was a vibe, and that's where, I know what I think I know what Nathan's saying, but the truth is, I more agree with Sam that if you're like I am, like a local church pastor, vibe is super important, and it's not going to show up on a national scale. Just look at the influence. Just look at the influence of Minneapolis. Yeah, Shannon, you've got something. You've got a lot of static in your sound. I don't know what it is. So one of the things that you learn is you kind of always have to have, everything is also local, because we are local. And part of what the emergent church story is important to me is it's underneath, it's a tell in the culture, and it's underneath the history of the Christian Reformed Church. And, it was interesting that I posted some of this stuff on CRC Voices, and Phlebas's brother was like, holy cow, I didn't know any of this stuff. And then he starts and he's beginning to see that it actually has was in there. Okay, Shannon, I did get an email from you. I haven't responded yet, but it is in my box. So why don't you unmute and then we'll see. Sometimes the static goes away if you talk.
Yeah, hopefully it was turned off the noise cancellation. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Yeah, I just saw. Obviously, late to joining this, but I was involved in the Emergent Church in Dallas in the early and mid 2000s, and have definitely been feeling the emergent vibes as I sort of jumped more into this channel and the Discord, and I think it's very interesting listening to the Emerge podcast, and I'm kind of curious to see if they actually talk to anybody that was not a leader. Like, when they talk to any congregants that attended, I was there, and almost everyone I know that went no longer goes to the church.
You're gonna have to really speak up. You're barely hearing you.
So a lot of the people that went to the church are no longer there. Like, they no longer go to church, period. Maybe wouldn't even call themselves Christian. And I think Zach was making that point in his writing as well. And so I'm hoping that the Emerge podcast gets into that and actually will talk to people that were part of it. You know, not just the
Yeah, the rise and fall of Mars Hill did that. I mean, they Driscoll didn't participate, but they did go. And I think, again, CW's point, I think, is really strong on that in many ways they might have eventually had more significance if they hadn't abandoned their people. Now, I'm sure that's not true of all of them, but I think, again, they were formed in the evangelical mega church where, and Christian knows this very well, because I remember this moment when I got back to North America. There are a lot of guys coming out of seminary or coming into these churches, and what they wanted to do was be a mega church pastor rock star. And oh yeah, or a worship leader or something that was going to be big on stage. And that was it's part of the reason the CRC never really was terribly successful at the seeker movement. It's just because part of the deep formation in the CRC was servant leadership. And, you know, when Rod says I fetishize failure, he's got a point. And my wife makes the same point in terms of money, you know, because people sometimes want to throw money at me. And I'm like, and my wife's like,
take the money.
Take the money. And it's like,
it's punk rock. It's punk rock. It's the ethos of punk rock. It's a reaction to, but it's also trying to just build something on whatever's not the institution. And for a lot of those people that like don't go to the church anymore because they couldn't see it as the real church, they're taking the institution too seriously. Like, in my mind, they're taking it as seriously as those who want to be the mega rock star. And so the reason why they don't go to church is because they can't find the true institution. And like, you know, for me, the reason why I stay in the church is not because it's the true institution. It's because it kind of like what CW was saying, like, is the church is something that's different than the institution. And the institution's like either doing something for the real church or maybe even something separate from it.
All right, I am going to get rid of the link because I'm going to close this up at the top of the hour, but I want to hear from Mark D. Parker if he's still back there.
Can I just say first, I hope that Shannon can fix his sound, and you guys are emailing is encouraging me because I would love to hear from a congregant or a participant level person in the Emergent Church, if not as an epilogue to all this thing, at least as a continuation of it.
Well, Shannon, I can send CW your email address if that's okay with you, and maybe CW will revive his channel, and you'll be the third or the fourth on the CW.
He emailed you, Paul. He didn't email me. I think there's a reason for that. I mean, I could be wrong, but I could be wrong.
I think it'd be fine if you two spoke, so that'd be good. So, okay, Mark.
Just great discussions. I was just I'm thinking the TLC is still very heavily populated with seekers. Would you agree?
Yes.
That a seeker movement in itself, to the degree that it's a movement?
Well, see, and this is also an issue with this topic, because I think it's part of the reason, like Christian, Paul Antleitner, if you were in church leadership, you knew about the emergent movement. A lot of people who weren't in church leadership, you had no idea any of this was going on. So, and when you say seeker, I translate into that an unchurched person who is Christianity or spirituality curious and paying attention. But if you looked at like Strobel's book, there's a technical meaning in there too that professional church people will think about, instead of just someone who's they're here because they kind of want to talk about God.
And well, you know, God help us, Paul, like George Barna and them, they all did the thing Nathan is advocating for. But I'm pretty sure he wouldn't necessarily see that as legitimate either. So there's something
I know, and I
interesting.
was going to ask him, but I didn't want the whole thing to just go one direction with one question. But most people have zero idea, especially since the evangelicals, how obsessively evangelical Christians do statistics and study
themselves.
You could not go to a seeker church and not fill out survey after survey after survey. You're always taking the temperature of the room. You're always tinkering with your preaching according to science to boost up the amount of attendance, and you're playing with the music. I mean, if there's a data-driven scientific expression of church that has ever been on the face of the earth, it was the seeker movement.
Hey, PBK, a really quick, great quote. Andy Wilson, son of Douglas Wilson. Probabilities are the prophets of a mechanical God.
Bang.
There you go.
Yeah, and the emergent movement said, nuts to all that. We're going to do things like we want.
I would say that it was those things were not completely separate.
Yeah. So, Mark, I don't know if I stepped on your question or not.
No, there's not enough time to explore it. But the one thing I thought of is that we're even within the Christians. Seeker as a category. Just people looking for what was the whole U2 line. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I would say that's a good 80% of the TLC.
Yeah.
Have we arrived at the place where the streets have no name, Paul? Is that where we are?
And Mark, what's so interesting is that, let's say, in the corner that you occupy, in the house of Woo, some Pentecostals. So it was so funny because, like, in the 90s, we were planting church and we all had all these percept studies. We're doing exactly what Nathan would love, because it's all the marketing studies, and you could, if you were going to plant, if you're in the Christian Reformed Church in the 80s and 90s and you're going to plant a new church, you looked at these studies and you tuned your music and everything just to your marketing demographic. And then you're going to plant your new church here. And then, as I've heard many church planters say, yeah, we got there and we found the Pentecostals were there and we asked them about their studies and said, no, we just sort of prayed about it a lot and the Lord said, do it there. So, and so the relationship between, let's say, the Pentecostals and the non-charismatic evangelicals is another super interesting but very wonky area.
Yeah, I'll be respectful of your time. Love to talk to you more about it, Paul. Especially about the Pentecostal charismatic side.
All right. Okay, Aaron, you're our last question before I start the branding.
Save the stream. You're the only one who can.
High honor. Well, for me, I feel like the question is not. To me, it seems like what really keeps things alive is like how we treat each other and trying to be righteous. Because I feel like we are trying to keep civilizational Christianity or Judaism, including Jacob. It seems like we're going maybe like too far up of the hierarchy of trying to be a leader managing down, but we don't really focus on the people who are interested, and we don't really, I think like it's more of like a propositional thing rather than a way of life. And I feel like non-Christian people are like Christian-esque, where they like Christianity, but for whatever reason, they just want to have their Sundays off. So I don't know what you guys feel about that.
And this is where the civilizational Christianity and the hierarchy and the structure gets interesting, because it before, in the Seeker, and this is what Tim Keller's analysis was, during the Seeker movement, there was still enough of the 19th and 20th century Christianity in the culture that in order to get people into church, you just sort of had to activate them and raise their temperature a little bit, and then they would start going to church again. But you had all of this Christianity in the culture anyway. And that's changing because the United States has had, high levels of immigration. We have more Muslims here than we've ever had. Bible knowledge has tanked out in the popular world. So a lot of the people, this gets into what Dennis Prager keeps saying on the gospel seminar, Jordan Peterson thing, that if you get somebody who's a Christian and goes to church, their kids, they stop going to church, but they sort of have a whole bunch of Christian formation and ideas. It's the next generation where it's just like, then they're just completely prey to Netflix or Taylor Swift or whatever spirit is going through the culture, instead of just sort of being impacted by them. Now they're sort of complete consumer. But it tends to be then at that level that they'll have a crisis, because a lot of the formation in Christianity kind of helps people keep their family and their job and all of those things. When all of that is abandoned, then suddenly they're susceptible to drugs or alcohol or sex or all the kind of or gambling. Then the bottom falls out, and then they go to a 12-step group, and boom, they're right back in the process again.
I wonder if that's part of the cognitive dissonance of outsiders looking in on this kind of intramural Christian conversation. So whereas we are using these very grandiose categories of like civilizational religion and Christianity, they might see that as a euphemism for, psychologically addressing the hangover of the collapse of our cultural dominance.
Right.
And yet we're still using this imperialistic language.
Yeah. And what's interesting about, Nathan kind of says, well, you guys don't have any data, so you shouldn't be talking. But the problem is that these mass movements go through the country and dominate regardless of any of the data. For example, Donald Trump in his first term, American greenhouse numbers went down. Why? Donald Trump was out there saying, bring coal back. But actually what happened during Donald Trump's term was that natural gas, he also let, say, fracking happen. So natural gas prices went down. So actually more coal plants went offline, more natural gas plants went online, and greenhouse numbers went down. And when Barack Obama came into office, gun sales went up. And so the world is so complex. That's back to Sam's point, that it doesn't matter whether or not people, whether they look at the science of climate change or how many different things, once something goes through the culture, it's going to move numbers. And so then the managerial class wants to say, oh, don't say anything unless you have numbers. But it's like, yeah, that really hasn't quite worked. You've got a point, but it hasn't worked. Go ahead, Christian.
I can give you some numbers. The first Passion conference I went to had 15,000 people in 2006, 2005, and 2006. And when I took a group, not as a college student, but as a pastor, it had 60,000 people. Those are real numbers.
Yeah.
And those numbers then represent network effects of the people that couldn't go, that would have wanted to go, that buy the album sales, that have real metrics. CCLI has metrics for how many Chris Tomlin songs were being sung in churches, but those were taken by the influencers that went to Passion and went back to their church and liked the new song and played it at the church. And you don't have to have necessarily the data from that to know how influence happens. And so when I see Russell Brand become a Christian, and when I see those things happen, that's what I'm referencing with numbers. And but we can't even, or with Jordan Peterson, having the hardcore people that buy a ticket to go to his conference or his thing. You could get the data. I mean, I think there was 8,000 or 10,000 people at the one I went to. Again, but then when we talk about the network effects of the digital nature, it's algorithmic related to the effect that it's had on people. So you don't have to. I don't think you have to have the exact numbers to really experience the vibe shift that's real. And so
I think it's less about the numbers, more as measuring the effect. It's like, there's an effect, but how do you talk about what it is? And I think that's part of what he's getting at.
And so I read Ryan Bird. I read Kinnaman. I read Barna. So I read lots of people's with numbers. But the thing is, the more you start playing with that stuff, the more you realize. So I come back to North America. I get the call here to this church. I start pastoring here. I'm fed all of this seeker stuff. And I say, well, how am I going to figure out how well my church is doing? And so I spent about 3 months thinking about trying to concoct a system based on behaviors and surveys and profession to try and put a Christian number on the people in my church. And after about 3 months, I said, this is total bullshit. And it has everything to do with Vervaeke and Peterson and Vervaeke and Peterson have been saying. It's that, what exactly do you measure? And then the deeper you get into that, remember, Peterson has spent most of his career doing psychometrics, which is all of this to try and distill human temperament down into numbers. That's what he did. Well, I've watched people try to do this with religion, which is nearly impossible to define as such. And then you're going to measure someone's Christianity and come up with a number. It's like, forget about it.
It's at least the recipe for pseudoscience to the extent to which you carry on down the road. And maybe that's all Nathan's trying to say.
Well, I would say
it sounds like you agree with him. Like
I tracked attendance. I tracked attendance records for 5 years using an app at my church, and between going from around 200 to 500 in attendance on average. And we would look at the times of the year when attendance, we could tell, because the ebb and the flow of attendance would correlate with New Year's. It would correlate with
the NFL season.
If the Super Bowl, it would correlate with time change. It would correlate with Mother's Day, and all these things. And so what we began to do was try to plan events to help bolster those dips. And because what was our metric, to Paul's point, necessarily you could pretend or you could believe it was the care of the people, maybe some care was happening. I'm just saying, regardless, that it, to some of Luke's points and these types of things, like my aversion to that is not that there aren't people that do get some care, but I think that that is church growth, startup culture. That's what that is. And so I have some of it's not taking the number, the sociological numbers like the Dunbar number seriously as something that you should consider, not just as a barrier to be broken. All of the church culture growth literature basically call these things number ceilings to break through, not to contend with. They see them as something that you should outgrow. Yeah. And I don't think that that's right in certain ways. I want to say one last thing. One last thing is just that innovation and creativity as the telos is a recipe for burnout. And I feel like that was a big part of the emergent movement was creativity, as really Rob Bell's Pneuma, the new forms of rock and roll, innovation with rock and roll into worship, technology, lights, apps, everything that was set very, very, very high as a telos in that movement. And I think part of the deconstruction is also burnout from that, as being what you design your churches by.
Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah.
Paul, for the conversation.
All right, everyone. Thank you all. Special thanks to UCW. Thanks for jumping in. And thank you, Shannon. I will try and get your emails to each other so you two can talk, and I'll respond to your email too, Shannon. So all right, navigating patterns. Don't miss navigating patterns. We'll be live streaming this afternoon. So and sorry for not shout out the 30. Ups. I haven't really watched any of the 30-minute things. Algo serves them up, but I don't know why. My own salience hierarchy remains a mystery to me. What I click on and what I get mentioned, but Ups.
Yeah, in that weird space of ambiguous Paul intentionality, how long do you intend to ride this wave, Paul, or are you already losing interest? Like, are you going to try to get with the Emerge podcast people and have your own panel debrief with them and go full meta on this whole thing? How far are you going to go down this road, Paul? Now that you've opened this Pandora's box, how far are you committed to really seeing this thing through? I just wonder. The audience wants to know, Paul. I'm just asking the question.
You want to know. I guess you're part of the audience. I hadn't even thought of it. Although I have gotten messages from some names in the movement that I recognize that want to talk. So there might be some randos coming out with some of these guys, which that aspect I'm super interested in, because Shannon's point, I'm really interested in that point. Because and CW, your points today, they've been really strong. So I don't know, but how long do I, at some point I'll probably do more on Peterson and his gospel seminar, and then I've got 20 irons in the fire. Which one do I pick up at any given time?
This is like your opportunity, Paul. I feel like your long form conversation with Peterson is only going to happen when he's like a completely defunct, spent public figure. So these are the people that you should talk to, Paul. They're there. They're right there. They want to talk to you. They're available.
That's probably the best time for me to talk to Peter. That would be the most interesting time for me to talk to Peterson, when he's a defunct public figure, to do the postmortem on the Jordan Peterson.
Maybe that's wrong of me. I feel like it could happen. I don't know.
Yeah, my eventual talk with Jordan. It's so funny because I hear, oh, Jordan wants to talk to you. It's like, I'm not hard to get to. I'll move some stuff on my calendar, Jordan. Not a big deal. So, but what are you doing, Andrew? He's yawning into the camera. CW, good point. But yeah, is the emergence such a hot thing that I can ride its coattails? I mean,
the algorithm has spoken, Paul. This is the whoosh you got.
No,
it might not be the whoosh you wanted, but it's the whoosh you got.
Well, actually, the emergent videos have not performed anywhere near, let's say, a commentary on a Jordan Peterson Bible thing functions in the algorithm.
That's true. Yeah, you better keep on the Pajot line. That's the safe. That's the stuff that's bringing the real money in.
Yeah, there's not a lot of real money. You used to be a supporter, CW. I lost you. So, money out of my pocket. Why am I letting you on when you dropped me, huh?
Like, we all have to listen to our wives at some point. Your wife wants me to give you money. My wife says, why the fuck are you giving him money? I got to choose. And,
Yeah.
All right. Maybe that is the best place to end. So you guys don't know what I have in terms of branding here. Any requests of what you'd like to hear?
Dog bark is eternal.
I will do the dog bark. We could. All right, Christian, you take care. We could do a little bit of Freddy. Just to, where is that Freddy one? Boom, boom, boom. Oh, come on, I can't see it. We already did the London. We had Chad's yellow car. I don't see the old. Oh, there it is. Here we go. All right, ducks eat bread. Liturgy, my friend. Ducks
They
eat
do.
bread.
They like it. Sorry. They do. They like it.
Oh, such a loss. All right. Thank you for tuning in.
Fast Freddy G knows it all. That's my old name, G.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All that long this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
You walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah. Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me. walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me. I want Jesus. I want Jesus to walk with me. To walk with me. Walk with David, a little.